Well, a good gracious afternoon or morning or whatever time it is when you're joining us. Hey, this is Main Street. I'm Geoffrey Mark, filling in for my buddy Gary Allen. Gary will be back with us in 2 weeks, full time, hosting this wonderful show. I get the honor of being with you today and one more time. And today's guest host is Jeff. Today's guest is Gregg. Let me tell you about Gregg. The Gregg I'm talking about, oh, he's about 6'2", very good looking, an amazingly talented actor. You've seen him on soap operas like Days of Our Lives and As the World Turns. He's also an amazing jazz singer, and he's spending much more of his time these days singing and being gorgeous than he is acting and being gorgeous. He also does a ton of voiceover stuff. You've heard his voice everywhere. On top of all of that, he's very intelligent. He's got some good insights to what it's like to be a part of a theatrical dynasty. Because if you haven't already guessed, Gregg is part of the brothers Marx family. The Marx brothers were, in no particular order, Groucho, Harpo, Chico, Zeppo. Those were the ones who made the films. But there was another brother, Gummo, who was in their vaudeville act and left the act to become a very powerful agent in Hollywood. If you wanted to get stuff done, you went to Gummo Marx. Gregg is Gummo's grandson. And if you're wondering why I'm giving him such a big build-up, it's because our wonderful tech guy, Tom, is talking Gregg through how to join us on here. There was a technical glitch. I think that these sorts of broadcasts, podcasts, if you were, are wonderful. It has opened the world up to so much talent, but we're not used to live anymore. Now, back in the 1940s and 50s and early 60s, much of television was live. People missed cues. There were people who got shot in a drama who stood up at the wrong time. People at home were used to there being technical glitches. We're not used to that anymore. And I feel apologetic, but that's what live broadcasting is. We cannot control the internet. We cannot control people's home electronics. We cannot control what happens. So I'm all sparkly and ready. And I'm going to talk about the Marx brothers until Gregg joins us. And he will join us, I promise. I don't think people really know the history of these men, or that they had an incredible stage mother named Minnie. In fact, there was a Broadway musical written about their beginnings that centered on Minnie, that Shelley Winters started on Broadway, Minnie's Boys. Unlike a lot of the Borscht Belt Jewish comedians that you might know, the Marxes were not Eastern European immigrants. Their mother was German. Their father was French near the German border. In fact, his nickname was Frenchie. So when they came here, they didn't speak Yiddish. They spoke German. Their food was not the Eastern European Jewish food we think of mostly. It was strudels and German things. That was what they were about. They also had an uncle, Minnie's brother, who was a big vaudeville star, Al Sheen. And Minnie, as soon as she could get her boys together, helped them to form the act. They went through all sorts of vaudevillian type things. They got better and better. Each one began to hone their on-camera persona, because eventually they'd be making films. Groucho was the wisecracker because that's who he was. Harpo wasn't as comfortable with the witticisms. So along the way, they eliminated his talking and he played the harp. Chico developed this Italian persona. He's not Chico, he's Chico because he chased the chicks. And then Gummo was because he wore rubber-soled shoes like galoshes on his feet because sometimes their shoes wore through. And Zeppo, I don't think anybody really knows. They think maybe it was a Zeppelin he was named after. So those are the Marx brothers. Some of their children became famous, and at least one of their grandchildren became famous. And that's who our guest is today. He is Gregg Marxx. And Tom, why don't you bring Gregg in so he can say hello?
Howdy.
There you are, you handsome guy. Thank you for being here with us today.
Like your hat.
Thank you, sir. I like your everything else.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's funny when you have friends on shows like this, you don't quite know where to start. I was aware of you long before I met you, and decades before that. And before I got to know the Marx family a little bit, I became aware of you as this good-looking soap opera guy and singer. You've had an amazingly long career. Most people who do the soaps rely on youth and how good they look shirtless to have a career, and eventually they don't work much. You're just continuously working. Was that a conscious decision in your career?
Nothing has been a conscious decision in my career. No, seriously. I'm not a strategizer. And I sort of, every once in a while, every few years, I seem to kind of reinvent myself. And I sort of reinvented myself as a singer because I didn't sing, I really didn't. Cheers.
To your health and to your singing, sir. Because I will tell the folks, our friends who are watching, you have a voice like honey. I could listen to you sing all day long.
You're very kind. Thank you.
He didn't say which kind, but I'll take the compliment. When did you make the transition? Because I don't think your early music was the standards, was it?
Oh, yeah.
Always?
I've always gravitated. I jokingly say I was born in the wrong era because I love all the stuff from the 30s and the 40s.
You and me both, my friend.
Yeah. Well, they truly don't write them like they used to. But I came to the music late. I sort of took lessons forever and was, frankly, terrified to take it out into the world. And finally got the gumption up to do it. And now that's really the focus of my creative life. So
it amazes me, and I won't mention any names because what I'm about to say is not necessarily a positive thought. There are so many cabaret singers. Now, I don't think of you as a cabaret singer. I think of you as a jazz singer. But there are so many cabaret singers out there who seem to have no get me on the stage. And they have not really a whole lot of talent or any taste. The people I know who are talented and have taste, they're the ones that sort of hold back a little bit and they wonder if it's the right thing. It's like, get out there and sing. You're perfect.
That is kind of, I recognize the truth in that. Let's just say that. By the way, speaking of amazing cabaret singers, in fact, it seems not expansive enough to describe her. I went and saw Marilyn May last night at the Purple Room. And I can't tell you, just as an audience member, it was extraordinary. As a singer, it was a masterclass.
She is in the encyclopedia. When it comes to cabaret singers, her face should be there because she is of that kind of performing. She is the absolute best, and she's not young.
No, she's actually, I don't think I'm discussing anything that's not common knowledge. She's 93, I believe.
And she's just
and as alive as any 60-year-old I know. She was just, and the thing that, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on singing, but there was her patter and her songs seamlessly integrated into one just mesmerizing performance. I was just floored.
She's an entertainer. You know, I got a nice compliment last night. I think you know already. I sang last night at the Catalina Jazz Club in Hollywood.
And how did that go?
It was a lovely evening. It was a salute to Johnny Mercer.
Right.
The master of ceremonies was Johnny's grandson. The man playing for us was Johnny's son-in-law.
Wow.
And I got to sing Satin Doll with a wonderful Quincy Jones arrangement. But the thing that the compliment I got, both from the owner of the club and from Johnny's grandson, is that everybody else pretty much got up, did what they were going to do, and sat down. And I didn't. I did shtick. I did some comedy. I told stories, and then I sang the song. And he said, "You're not just a singer. You're an entertainer. There's more to you than just getting up there and singing." It's like, well, to keep an audience's attention going, you kind of sort of have to do that. The audience, you've experienced this. The audience was not as enthusiastic as I would have liked for the people who came before me on the program. So before I even opened my mouth to sing, I did an audience warm up with them, got them moving, got them laughing, shamed them a little bit. Come on now, we need your energy. Got them going so that the rest of the show was bigger and brighter. And that's a set of muscles all of us who sing have to develop, because we can't just stand there. We have to interact with the people.
Yeah, there is that piece. There is that piece.
Now, I'm bombastic. You know that. You do it so differently, and yet the results are just as good. You are a calm, romantic, quietly dominating presence when you sing.
Okay. I'll take that.
No, it's because you don't do shtick. You talk to the audience, but while you're singing, you can't look anywhere else. It's just everyone's focused on you, but you do it quietly. I do it bigger because that's my personality.
Right.
And I had the opportunity to see you sing a few weeks ago at the V Club out here in Palm Springs, and good heavens, you sang for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the audience was just in love with you. Wow. That must be so. I hope it's satisfying for you.
It is. It's also daunting. I mean, I have realized at my ripe old age that I am shyer than I thought. I'm less of an extrovert and more of an introvert. Posing as an extrovert, and for me, singing is extremely personal. It's really, really personal. I don't like to sing songs that I don't really connect to. I will. Sometimes you have to. Somebody wants to hear a song, or you know, you're hired because of a particular thing they want you to do. But if my connection to the music is a very, very personal thing, and sometimes putting that personal connection out into the world can be daunting for me. So I experience that intermittently. That may be the quiet that you're picking up on, because it's kind of internal. And the trick for me, the challenge for me, is to allow that internal connection and connect with the audience simultaneously.
And you do it beautifully, sir.
Thank you. One or the other doesn't really work.
No, they both have to be there. You know, I part of my warm up last night, I was saying, you know, first you have to have a great song. If the song is mediocre or terrible, I don't care how good of a singer you are, you can get through it, but it won't be wonderful. The second thing is you got to have a singer who knows what the song is about and can deliver to the audience the intent of the composer.
Right.
And then the third thing that most singers don't think about, and I don't know why, you have to have a superior arrangement. For those of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about, a song has notes and chords in it, but what the musicians are playing behind you while you're singing is called the arrangement. If the arrangement is lackluster or ordinary, you can sing your ass off, but it comes across as ordinary. And I will again compliment you. You have superior arrangements that serve the songs you sing and your voice.
Thanks. Well, that's the goal. You know, you want, and I, as a singer, I'm a big fan of respecting the lyric and respecting the songwriter. Um, I'm not a big proponent of vocal gymnastics to impress everybody and not really serving, because they're all, it is telling a story. It is,
Yes.
it is literally telling a story, sharing a story with the audience. And it's a different way of approaching it. You know, some people, it's more about the show. Me, it's more, at least in my better moments, it's about sharing like this wonderful piece of material with the audience. You know, is the truth of this, or the beauty of it, or both. Hopefully both. So
You do it very, very well, sir.
thank you.
Because you were having technical problems, I spent the first 4 or 5 minutes of our show today talking about your family background. And I asked you before the show, do you really want to discuss that or not? Because I have other friends in show business. I'll just mention one, Lucy Arnaz. And I don't really talk about her family when I talk with her. I talk about her work, what she's doing, what her projects are. You said, let's do that. So I've already let our friends out there know basically the family timeline and how you come into it. Was there any pushback in your career because your last name ends with an X?
Not really, although very early on, and I don't recall who this casting director was, actually, but I do remember I was an unknown commodity. I walked in for an interview, a general interview with this particular casting director, and with folded arms, he said, "Oh, you're a Marxx. Be funny."
Ooh.
And I didn't know enough as a young actor to sort of either use that or walk out the door. I let it intimidate me because there always was and still continues to be a double-edged sword. You know,
Yes.
Mark's name has opened doors. It has also raised expectations. I'm not my uncles and my grandfather. I have a crazy side too. And hopefully I have some of their genetics. But you know, when you're walking in, I was at one point, Chris Lemmon, Jack Lemmon's son, and I were in acting class together, and he struggled mightily because this was his dad. This was not his grandparents and his grandfather and his great uncles. Someone of Jack Lemmon's stature, it was really difficult for Chris. I don't think I'm saying anything that he wouldn't have He told you. It was very, very hard to rise to the level of expectations as a result of the family name. I experienced some of that.
I know. Like again, I'm not saying anything that is in public, but Lucy once said to me, you know, I got it both ways. My parents named me Lucy. I'm stuck with the Lucy name, and then my last name is Arnaz. Right. And then I got married and my name is Luckenbill. No matter where I turn, there's some other famous person, you know, and then her brother is famous. And she had to work very, very hard to establish her own personality, her own kind of career, where people don't expect her to be just like anybody else.
Right.
Now you look like Gummo. I've told you you're like Gummo 2.0 because Gummo was a nice looking man, but you're very good looking. But you look like a Marx. You do. Now I've known your cousins, Arthur, Groucho's son. I knew from the Friars Club, and Harpo's son Billy was a wonderful, wonderful pianist, and I've sung with Bill. We all had lunch the other day.
Yeah.
But Arthur had problems because Groucho was his father.
I'm sure.
Not only with the name, but with his father actually interfering with his career.
Right.
Because Groucho was concerned with how Arthur's career would reflect back on him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine Billy had any problem with Harpo. I've never heard of anyone having a problem with Harpo.
No.
For our friends out there who are Lucy fans, when Harpo Marx was on I Love Lucy and he played on the harp, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, that was Billy's arrangement. Billy was there that week. And there's a point in the show when Harpo has Carolyn Appleby over his shoulder, slung over, and he dropped his hat. And being a stage performer, he could have just kicked it away, but he didn't. And he bent down and picked up the hat with Doris Singleton on his shoulder and had a heart attack like an hour later after the show was over.
I did not know that.
So a little family history there. I have respect for soap opera actors. You're having to learn a new script every day, minimal rehearsals, which means there's minimal blocking. It's mostly close-ups, and because there isn't time.
Right.
Were you only on two? I know you were on Days of Our Lives and As the World Turns. Was that your two?
Those were my two.
For our Days of Our Lives fans, talk a little bit about the character you played, please.
David Banning. Poor David, because he could not get his life together. He had a difficult time growing up. But I was literally the third or fourth adult actor to play him. He had been on the show for many, many years, and I walked into the middle of a family of soap opera royalty. Actually, Susan Hayes played my mom. Doug was Doug. Bill Hayes. Bill Hayes was my stepdad. It was the Central family. McDonald Carey was my grandfather, and
actually, he was your great grandfather.
My great grandfather, exactly, and Francis Reed, and I mean, it was quite and it happened rather quickly after I decided I wanted to act. So I kind of got thrown into the deep end, but I had a lot of people there who were there helping me swim. So
our buddy Wesley, who I think is watching, was also on this show. I've told him the same thing. Days is the only soap opera I've ever watched. I got started watching it when I was in college in the early 70s. And I just, because of McDonald Carey and Francis and because of Susan, I thought she was just a marvelous, marvelous actor. And of course, I know who Bill Hayes was as a singer. And I'll embarrass you, when you came on to play the part. And of course, they don't make a big deal of it. Just one day it's a different face. And I went, looking at it was like for half a second, young Jeff swooned at young Gregg. But because you're so good at what you do, immediately I bought you in the part. I got over and went, oh, this is going to be good. He's bringing a depth maybe that I hadn't seen to the part before, because it was a very hard part to write, because chronologically the character went from being, I believe Susan's character got raped, and that's how David came along. And one day she's pregnant, and 5 years later he's in college. They did that with their characters. That's why at one point Frances playing Alice was a great grandmother on the show,
Right.
because they kept speeding up the different generations to
Right.
bring new young actors onto this show.
Well, they stretch credulity on
They did.
those shows. I mean, the story of I believe it was the character of Timmy that was sent up to his room and never came down.
No, he did 2 years later.
Oh, he did.
One of the Horton children, Tommy, excuses himself after dinner and goes upstairs, and the actor was fired from the show, and they didn't know what to do about it. They just didn't refer to him.
Right.
And they came up with a new storyline because Marie, who left the show also because the character was fired, they wrote her off saying she went to become a nun, which
Right.
means that the Hortons were Catholic. And they wrote a story where the nun falls in love with her brother and doesn't know it's her brother. And
Right.
they needed him back. Then one day he just walks, hi, Mom, what's for breakfast? And it's very funny.
You have to suspend a certain amount of disbelief on those shows.
And for our As the World Turns fans, we'll go from NBC to CBS. Talk a little bit about your character there.
Well, Tom Hughes, that was it was about a year between the two, and I actually went to New York to visit some friends. Had what I thought was a general interview with Vince Liebhardt and Phyllis Kasha, who used to cast the show. I read for them, thinking it was just a general audition. I went to a payphone. This is how long ago. On Broadway and 51st, and called in and said, they said, how did it go? And I said, I think it was fine. And they said, well, it certainly was, because they want to come to Los Angeles in a couple of weeks and test you for the role. And I said, what role? And then it started unfolding that they were looking to replace, they needed to replace Tom Hughes. And so 2 weeks later, they came out to LA. I tested at CBS Television City on the set of The Young and the Restless. And a couple of weeks later, they said, okay, you got to move to New York. So I moved my whole life across the country, and it was a wonderful experience in many, many ways. First of all, moving to New York was a big, big watershed moment for me. I'd never lived anywhere other than Los Angeles. But also just the opportunity. He was a very multidimensional character, and it was a good fit. And it was also a very good fit with Hilary Bailey Smith, who played Margot, who played my wife. We instantly had a rapport, and she made me a better actor. She made me a much better actor because she was so generous. And our chemistry was just really great. So I felt like Days was kind of like, for me, it was sort of like the training wheels. And then I got onto World Turns, and the training wheels came off.
Did your being on two very iconic soaps, one of which is actually still alive, did it open up doors for you as an actor, or did it limit you to being a soap actor in casting directors' minds?
It probably did both. I think there was a period of time, probably before my tenure, but certainly there was a time when soap actors just did soaps, except for in New York, they also did theater.
Right.
But they were not really considered actors for nighttime or film. You know, he's a soap actor. She's a soap actor. Those lines have been blurred, I think. Big stars do commercials, big TV stars do films. A lot of people now want to do television because there's so much good TV on. The ground rules have changed. So I think it was like anything else. It was a mixed blessing. It was, yes, he's a soap actor, and yes, there are certain talents that come with that, and certain ability to come up with lines fast or learn a lot of material. but then there are also people that expect that you're going to not be able to go as deeply, which is, frankly, is a danger in those shows for actors, because you don't have an opportunity. It's quick, and you move really fast, and the story's got to be told. And sometimes character suffers as a result, and it falls to the actor a lot of the time. It certainly did in my case, to sort of be the guarantor of the integrity of the character.
Right.
Why am I saying this? Well, somebody has to say it in the episode. Well, but yesterday I said exactly the opposite. It's like, well, the writer wants you to say it. And when I was on the show, World Turns especially, we had Doug Marland writing the show, and he was extraordinary.
I've changed my mind. You save a line, yes. That's funny. That's very funny.
Yeah, that happened frequently.
Is there, in your history as an actor, one part or one show that, like, all right, that was the one that satisfied my soul?
Tom Hughes.
You were so good on it. I mean, when I say I don't watch soaps, Days is the only one I watched as often as I could. I sampled other shows just to see who was acting and what was going on.
Right.
You're so good at everything you do. But there came a point where you decided, it's just the truth, my friend, just accept it.
Well, all right, thank you.
Where you decided that on-camera acting wasn't necessarily what you wanted to be doing. Can you give us a little hint into why that decision was made?
Sure. It's multifaceted, the answer, but
I was hoping for that.
I did not grow up as a kid saying I want to be an actor. I have friends who did, and some of them became very successful, others did not, and that's a whole nother story. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I settled on law. I was going to be an attorney, and what I realized as I was in school, just before I applied to law school, was that I wanted to be Perry Mason. I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I moved in that direction, but I always had done voiceover work. I loved voiceover work. I still do it now. It's been a whole separate career, and the rest of the acting thing I sort of fell into after that. So when I realized that I wasn't sure I wasn't so comfortable with always being in front of people on a day-to-day basis, certainly in their living rooms 5 days a week. I decided I really, and because I had the voiceover to fall back on, both financially, but also just in terms of the satisfaction of doing something creative, I really moved much more firmly into that camp. That is not to say that I don't have regrets when I look back and think, what if I had stayed? I thought about that, especially with World Turns, because Scott Holmes, who took over the role from me in World Turns, ended up staying on the show until it ended, which was like 20 some odd years later. And there was more to be mined there, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah, you could have played the part and been a great grandfather to somebody on the show.
Or a great grandmother at this point.
Yeah, you're talking about your voiceover work. Is that not your recording booth behind you, sir?
That is my recording booth behind me. It's it looks like a dungeon, but it's actually a recording booth.
It can fill both things. Hey,
it can, but it has not. It is only the recording booth.
I know I'm full of compliments with you today, because I honestly mean them. A lot of people in show business have lovely careers. You've had one, I've had one. And you reach, you hit 40 or over 40. And for a lot of people, the work starts to disappear. It starts to dry up. You and I are very lucky men. We are both over 40. and we are both constantly working. Do you think it's just a whole lot of hard work on your part or luck? Because I'm sitting here looking at you on the monitor, and if someone told me that you were 42 or 43, I said, well, of course he is. We're not going to talk about how old you and I actually are. We're not going there at all.
Let me adjust my ring light.
But has whatever age you are, has that ever affected your career at all? Have you dealt with ageism?
I don't know if I have or not, because sometimes you don't know what you're dealing with. Because you're not privy, certainly as an actor, you're not privy to the discussions in the casting office and so forth. I'm grateful that I've been able to sort of look younger than my age.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, it's kind of a gift in a very ageist society. It is, we all, if we're lucky enough to live long lives, we all go through the aging process, and it is a weird thing. Certainly for me, being on TV, in voiceover, nobody cares what you look like. This would be dressed up for a voiceover gig. It's a very different, there is a luxury in that too for me. Doesn't matter if you're having a bad hair day, usually you have a cap on or something like that anyway. The scrutiny, and I can only imagine what it's like for women, because I think it's much worse for women, but even for men, and when you're leading man, I imagine for character actors, it might be a different story. But for leading men, and especially leading men in the soaps in the mid '80s, looks were paramount. They were important.
I once had a conversation about this with Steve Allen, and he bottom line, he said, sooner or later, as we age, everybody in show business looks like a drag queen, because we all have to wear so much makeup and get, teeth bleached and eyes done and Botox done and hair dyed. And he meant it more specifically for females, which is funny because Jane, here's some gossip, boys and girls. Jane Meadows, his wife, had her eyebrow, her eyeliner, and her lips tattooed to make it easier for her to put on makeup or to have makeup people follow the look she wanted.
Wow.
And without makeup on, it was a little ghostly. And I was in Steve's office one day, we'd hang out. The man was such a brilliant raconteur and Renaissance man. We would talk about anything. And he said, you can't stay too long today, Jeff. I have other meetings. And then, and he picks up the phone and he starts to giggle. And he says, well, I guess you're staying another hour. I said, why? He said, Jane is here. She hasn't got makeup or a wig on, and you can't walk out of my office until she leaves. She won't have you seeing what she actually looks like.
Wow.
And the two of us, here's this great big star, this huge television icon.
Right.
And his wife won't let him open the door to let me out because she's there. Does it worry you at all? Aging used to worry me until I began to realize that the older I'm getting, the better looking I'm getting. And I'm actually, if you saw pictures of me from when I was 15 years younger, you'd say those are newer. Somehow life has been very good to me that I'm aging backwards, at least on the outside. Does it concern you at all?
Only in an existential way. That we're sort of blips, we're not permanent. As long as I don't look like Jane Meadows with tattoos on my face, I'm okay.
Hey, there are lots and lots of photos of your grandfather and his brothers at our ages,
right?
And they look like old men,
right?
We don't.
I think part of it was the time. Part of it, culturally being of a certain age at this point. It's not your grandfather's 60 something. Um, it is weird, but I have other friends, and we talk about this sometimes, not necessarily actors, who talk about that they feel younger than and look younger and act younger, and have a younger point of view than their grandparents did at the same age. And I think that's true. I think that's true. I don't know exactly why, but or maybe it's wishful thinking.
No. You know that I will embarrass you to your last nerve, telling you how good looking you are and how well you look. But since we've talked about your family, so much has been written about Groucho by his son, Harpo by his son, Chico by his daughter. Could you spend a few minutes telling us what Gummo was like as a grandfather?
Sure. He was one of only two that I had, so I only have the experience of the two. But I adored him sort of from afar. He was not a particularly effusive guy. I think he was quite shy.
So it runs in the family.
It does, and I think that's part of why he decided not to pursue the performing end of the business. I think he was an innately a shy man, and actually, by the time I knew him, or was old enough to know him well, he was quite hard of hearing, and so he sort of retreated into that place. I think as a result of not being able to hear really well. But he wasn't. My grandmother, his wife, Helen, was sort of more the touchy-feely, huggy kind of, and he was a little more reserved. He used to. I always knew that he loved me though, because he would because he smoked cigars incessantly, as most of the brothers did. And he would always give me the little cigar ring, the little paper ring from his cigars. And at that time, that was like the best. That showed you that Grandpa really loved you, because you got the ring from his cigar wrapper. I remember he got me before we all had these little Star Trek phones. This was in the 60s. He gave me this little tiny, very small, it was about the size, half of my iPhone, but thicker. It was a little transistor radio. It was the smallest transistor radio I'd ever seen in my life. And it was like from my grandpa. It was such a cool new kind of invention. So we had a really, we didn't spend a lot of time together. I would only see them like on holidays or occasional things. But when we did, we had a really great connection, because he's my grandpa.
Yeah.
So
That was the next question. Growing up, being around other members of your family, was it family time, or as a child were you aware, oh, these people are famous?
Oh no, there was no. In fact, my father, I think, was tried to drill into the fact that I was from a famous family. I didn't really. Of course, I know it. I mean, it's a legacy, but I spent a lot of time as a young actor trying to distance myself from that, because, like all young people, or most young people, I think, I wanted to prove that I could do it on my own. So I never really sort of thought of my family as famous. And I think that's probably true of most families that are famous. Is just dad, your mom, your sister, your brother.
My late partner Joel Kabik was famous on the East Coast as a radio personality, and so our kids grew up him being famous. And I've gotten famous through the years. And oh, I was on the air today with Gregg Marxx. That's nice, Papa. So you want some pizza? It's just
Right.
they could not care less about the Emmy. Right. There it is. The Emmy, or what famous person is on the phone with me, or that I'm singing at this event or doing comedy. Couldn't care less. What's for dinner? What are you going to buy us? The usual things kids care
Right.
about.
Right. I think
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. That was my experience anyway. I mean, I've had occasion to just not that long ago, a friend of mine called me and he said one of his friends, had just purchased my grandfather Gummo's home in Tamarisk.
Oh, cool.
And he said, and I actually went to see it, and it was quite a wonderful thing. But it's just, they're just family. It's just, why did I bring up that story? Because there was some reason that I brought that up in terms of oh, I know, because then I had occasion to look back at a lot of family photos that I have of me as a little kid in the pool of that house. And it's just grandma and grandpa.
Right.
And I love that. I think that's really important, because that's what families are about anyway. They're not about, the latest premiere or so-and-so's, latest film.
I think the children and grandchildren of famous people who land well as adults are people who have had the kind of family experience we're discussing. We both know children of who did not have that experience, where it was all about the latest premiere and mom or dad's next movie or TV show or concert, and raised by nannies and servants, and they seem a lot more lost than the ones who get grounded in, hey, forget how they think about us. This is our family, us, a real sense of us.
I think that's true. I think that's true of any family. I think, if you've got that, those strong family connections are really important.
I think it makes for healthier individuals.
I think you're absolutely right.
There are so many stories. I won't go into them. We've got about 10 minutes left. Funny stories about your great uncles. There aren't about Gummo, other than for this very shy man, what a bombast he was as an agent. That if you had Gummo Marxx as your agent, we feel sorry for anybody who tries to screw him, because he'll just punch them down to the floor, literally, if he has to.
Right.
Are there any iconic Gummo stories?
Not that I'm aware of. Well, there's one that involves my dad, not me, and it wasn't. It was a story that my dad told me about my grandfather, but it was by way of my father when he was a little boy. He was a little kid, and he went to the first day of school, and the teacher was asking all the children, who are you, where do you come from, what's your family like, and so forth. And so apparently she came to my dad and she said, "So Bobby Marxx, I understand you come from a famous family." And she said, "Who's your father?" And he said, "My father is Groucho Marx," which was not true.
Right.
So apparently the word got back to my grandfather, Gummo, who was his father. And so when my dad got home from school, he said, "Bobby, did you tell the teacher that Groucho was your father?" And my dad, in sort of typical kid fashion, basically just said, "Mm-hmm." And he said, "Well, why would you do that?" And he said, "Well, who's ever heard of Gummo Marx?" So my dad knew at a very young age that my grandfather had sort of, moved into the background, but he was apparently a very, very good and powerful agent. He and Zeppo together. But yeah, that's the only story I know about my grandfather, is that he was replaced by Groucho when my dad was in school.
So for our friends who are watching, so there's the Marx brothers are this generation. Then there's your father's generation, which is also where Billy Marx comes in and Arthur Marx comes in. They are first cousins. Then
Correct.
you're the next generation down. Are you close to your peers in the Marx family? I know you're close to Billy.
I'm close to Billy. Billy is, I don't have to tell you, he is one of the most talented, but also one of the sweetest souls I have ever met in my life.
I agree with you. I've known him for about 25 years and happily so.
Yeah, he's an extraordinary human being. I'm also close with my cousin Jade, who is Groucho's granddaughter, Melinda's daughter. Literally one day years ago in Los Angeles, my voiceover agent, who was also a voiceover coach, she said, "I think I'm coaching your cousin." I said, "My cousin, who?" She said, "Your cousin Jade." I said, "I don't have a cousin Jade." She said, "Well, I think you do." And she introduced us, and Jade and I have become very, very close. And now I know her son, and but so those are the two. And I was very close with Chico's daughter, Maxine, who lived in New York and sort of took me under her wing when I moved to New York. And
Excellent.
Sort of, showed me around the big city.
You know, my history with Billy, as we mentioned at lunch the other day, was Bill Asher introduced us and put us together professionally. And Billy and I were sitting, I don't know what event, but we had dinner, and he was talking about his background. Billy's adopted.
Right.
And he said, "I don't know where I come from." I said, "I do." And the story I repeated about George and Gracie putting him into his parents' hands because the orphanage contacted them. They said, "No, our family's complete, but we've got someone sitting here," and they put Harpo on the phone.
Wow.
And when I told him that story, this is a long time ago, because he picked up the phone and called his mother and said, "I've got it figured out now, Mom," and put me on the phone with Susan. And I got a chance to at least exchange a few pleasantries with her. I've never met anyone in the Marx family who wasn't very intelligent, warm, decent, and talented. For all of the bombast we think of the Marx brothers, it seems that off stage, you're just a bunch of lovely people who happen to be very talented.
Well, I'll take it. Thank you.
What's coming up for you, sir? What do you have career-wise? What is happening next for you that we can share with our friends?
Well, hopefully more and more voiceover work. I always love that because that pays the bills and it's also fun. But as a singer, that's part of why I moved down, or a large part of why I moved down to the desert, because it seemed like there was more of an opportunity to do the kind of music that I do and that I love, that there was more of an audience for it. So I'm going to be doing some local appearances. We are going to be back at the V Wine Lounge probably in January.
And I will be there leading the cheering.
Thank you so much. That should be fun. And I just sang for the first time at Melvin's the other night.
Oh, how wonderful. What a great place.
I went in to meet Michael, who runs the musical end of things down there. And he invited me up to sing. And so I did about I think I did 5 tunes. Didn't have time to think about it. Just, okay, here we go. And he was wonderful. I don't know if you know him or if you know his work.
Yeah, I do.
He certainly, as an accompanist, was like right there. And he could play anything in any key. So that That was really great. So I'm gonna at some point be part of their Sunday jam.
Yay. Melvin's and I did not get along for a long time because Melvin's would not allow me to wear my hats in their restaurant.
Why not?
Because they have a very strict dress code. Men could not wear hats in my dining room, period. In fact, I was having a business dinner there with a bunch of people in the business, and they said, you either have to take your hat off or you're going to have to leave.
Wow.
And I left. The owners of Melvin's have decided I have become famous enough that it's okay, that it's part of my trademark, and it's okay to wear my hat there now. So I can go there now and eat with my hat on and sing with my hat on if I happen to be there. You're a splendid, splendid vocalist. And we have talked. Now, we're not pressing you against the wall here, but I will be recording an album next year. Geoffrey Marxx sings the Ella Fitzgerald songbook, and we're talking about Gregg and I doing a duet together.
Right.
And Can't We Be Friends? And I love to sing like you do. It's satisfying. Of all the things I do, writing books, doing comedy, producing, directing, what satisfies my soul the most is the singing.
Mm-hmm.
And to sing with someone whose voice makes me melt. What a wonderful, wonderful way to spend the day.
I'll try not to leave you in a puddle.
My dear friend, if we weren't on the air, I'd have about 17 punchlines for that. But it's funny. You know, you can say fuck on this show. It's okay. This platform. This platform allows you to do that. A very fast Ruta Lee story. I was hosting the Palm Springs First International Comedy Festival, and one of the things I did was a panel on women who do scripts who are funny. And I had dear Dawn Wells, may she rest in peace, and Joyce Bulifant, and Ruta Lee, and Allison Arngrim. And we were talking about, you know, ladies, as the scripts have gotten more grown up and more sophisticated, if a script calls for you to use blue language, what do you do? And I shared that I had never, ever said anything off color on a stage in my entire life. That even one thing required me to say the word fart, and I wouldn't do it. I said expressed gas because I was taught there's no need for that.
How tasteful.
Yeah, well, you know. Underneath all the glitter, I actually am a tasteful person. And Ruta opens her mouth and she says, Geoffrey, for Christ's sakes, you're over 40. Go out tonight and say the word fuck. Grow up.
I can just hear her say that.
Just exploded. And that night I was the opening act for much bigger comedians than I am. I think I was doing, it was Judy Tenuta and somebody else. And I went out and told the story, and the audience just got fractured by it. So I got to say one F-bomb on the stage, and it worked. It worked.
Thank God.
Can you believe this hour is over already?
No, you made it go so quickly with your very insightful questions, actually.
Well, I'm good at what I do, and I love you. So those two things combined make for us having a lot of fun together.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun for me. And
well, good.
I say that, you know, as someone who's not always enjoyed interviews. You know what you're doing.
I do. I won't go, oh gosh, no, I don't. Yeah, I do. I've been doing this an awfully long time, and I adore you. So those two things together, it has to be a happy hour. Is there anything you want to plug before we say good afternoon to our friends?
No, just thank you for having me as your guest. It was really a lot of fun.
I will have you as my guest as often as you care to be on this or any other show. So folks, that is our show for this week. Gary Allen, please feel better. He is healing beautifully. I believe he'll be back with you in 2 weeks. I haven't picked next week's guest star yet, or I would tell you who it is, but there'll be someone wonderful. Would you all at home please do this and thank wonderful Gregg Marxx for being with us this afternoon. It is mid-afternoon on the West Coast. It is the edge of night on the East Coast. And every week, Gregg got the joke. Every week, from the bottom of my heart, God bless and have a happy.